All right, so I'm Josh. I'm a heroin addict. So my sobriety date is today, 5/2014. Which it was funny because when Jeremy asked me to do this, like I didn't even think, like today's my sobriety date and how cool the opportunity is to share my experience, strength, and hope on a sobriety birthday. I mean, when I came into these rooms, like 5 years seemed unattainable. Like it seemed so far off, I couldn't even picture getting a year sober. I couldn't picture, even 6 months, 2 months, or a month, of being free of heroin, other drugs, and even alcohol. So I think it really is like, when I look at it, it's a miracle that I am where I am today, and I really can't give that to anything except, everyone in this program, my sponsor, and God as I understand Him. That's how I can be here today. Because that's not me, really. Like, I'm not that guy. I'm the guy who was like shooting dope, burning his life to the ground, ruining family relationships, just ruining everything. Everything I had worked to build in my life. Like, I pulled the structure down on its head, like the big book says. When I got to the program, for me, I didn't even really want to be sober, if I'm going to be honest about it, right? Like, I had some legal trouble when I got here, and I knew there was an issue in my life because all these things were going wrong and everything I kind of wanted to accomplish, like I wasn't anywhere close to accomplishing. And, when I talk to people, like when I talked to my mom, because she knew, I believe I told her on Mother's Day one year that I was a heroin addict and was like leaving to shoot some dope. So they knew, right? And so the big thing with them is when they talk to me, it's like, hey, you have a heroin problem, right? When I talk to my dad, you have a heroin problem. My friends, like, hey, you should stop shooting dope. Like, you have a problem with heroin. And so that's what I believed. And it even went so far as like, when I finally, I got arrested, heroin problem again, go to treatment, like heroin problem. And I don't know, I guess like, and some of it I understood that, but that didn't sit well with me because that kind of meant like all I had to do was quit shooting dope and my problem would be solved. But the last time I tried to like quit shooting dope on my own, like I went back to my parents' house and it ended with like me wrestling and like fighting my dad for my car keys and my brother pulling a shotgun on me as I walked out the door and like, almost crashing as I drove downtown. That's what it was like when I stopped getting high, right? Like things for me didn't get better necessarily, they got worse. And that's really why I didn't want to get sober. And I thought that when I came to Heroin Anonymous, I was gonna hear that same message, right? I was gonna hear that message like, you just gotta stop shooting dope. And I didn't really hear that. That wasn't the message I got. When I came here, I really heard, this real message of depth and weight. And I'm gonna talk about the big book a lot because it's really important to my recovery and how I got here today. But, they say frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices, like the message which interests someone like me must have depth and weight, is usually grounded in a power greater than himself. And what that message looked like for me was that life can be better, in sobriety, and through that, as a byproduct of living this better life and building this relationship with God, I can just stop shooting dope, and not get high and not have to deal with all that shit. And that made sense to me because my experiences before that, like I said, were when I stopped getting high, I was miserable, right? I wasn't like somebody who went around thinking, life is great, I'm not high anymore, right? I remember holding myself up in my parents' house, because that's what I did to try and get sober, among other things. I like sit there watching reality TV, like T.I. and Tiara or something, because that's all I could do, like laying on my bed, and I could like vividly remember smelling like, my smell came back and I could just smell like the fabric softener on the sheets and I wanted to throw up, and I would just get this crushing depression, like terrible. Like, how do people do this? How do people manage life without having this sort of release, And so that was my experience. That's why when I got to these rooms, I wasn't fully committed to this idea of sobriety as I understood it at the time. Because I was the guy where, family stuff, like my family, begging me to get sober, girls, whatever, that wasn't enough to do it. Losing a job, right? That never did it. And even things that were more serious and like more affected me, going to jail, right? Fear of dying, like that emotion, the stuff that played on my emotions just never did it. So when I came here, I finally got that message of, hey, like life can actually be better, and you can feel good and get this sense of purpose and accomplishment and just well-being and serenity if you work this program. And that's what I did. But just I guess I'll backtrack a little bit and talk about a little bit about my upbringing. So, when I was a kid, I was always full of fear. Fear was like a big presence in my life. And some of my earliest memories are like when I was like maybe 4 or 5 or I don't know. But I would have these really bad nightmares at night. And I had like a really weird obsessive compulsive thing too. Like I was a weird kid. But one of the things I would do before I went to bed was try and remember all my nightmares so I wouldn't have them again. And I'd have to like play out this routine over and over and over again, just based off of fear. And it never worked because I always had like more nightmares. And I'd run into my parents' room and I'd wake them up and they'd get really sick of it because like, you're too old for this, whatever, you got to stop. I'm pretty sure they deny it right now when I talk about it today. But I remember and I know what happened. Like one time my dad put me outside on the dog leash, right? Because like I kept waking him up at night and I was like, well, that's kind of fucked up. And I talk to them about it now and they say it doesn't happen, but I know. So that was like my experience. Like I just wasn't okay. I was afraid of everything. Like I said, going back, I remember like one of my first memories is telling my mom like I wasn't going to go to preschool anymore. She was a stay-at-home mom, so I always grew up with her around, and when it was time to go off into the big world of preschool, I didn't like it because I had to meet new people and talk to people, right? And I felt so uncomfortable doing that. And I told her I wasn't going to go, and she let me not go. And when it came to kindergarten, first day of school, like they had to drag me out to the bus. I have an older brother and sister, and I went like kicking and screaming and crying. And looking back on it, it was probably like really embarrassing now. But I didn't want to leave. Like these social situations like put a lot of pressure on me, and I tried to do the same thing where I told my mom I'm not going to kindergarten anymore, and she said, well, if you don't go, they're going to take me to jail. And I said, that's okay. I'll come visit you. It'll be all right. And that's how it went. I was also like I always had these like big illusions of grandeur, I guess. I can still have them. When I was young and people asked me what I want to be when I grow up, I wanted to be a billionaire because like sounded cool. I'm nowhere near that right now. Steadily chipping away at it. Maybe I'll get there, probably not. But that was like what I wanted. I wanted I wanted success, right? I wanted people to look up to me. Like I had like crazy plans. Like I was going to be president, but it was really just this attempt to overthrow the world one day. And like it was pretty in detail. And like I just wanted something to make me feel like I fit in, right? Because I did not feel that way. So I thought if I had these things outside of me, like this success, this, whatever, this status, this prestige, that people would finally accept me. And those thoughts weren't really fleshed out when I was that young, but I can see it like, when I was in elementary school and I didn't have a lot of friends. And so what I did was like I sought out the popular kids, and I figured that if I just like fit in with them, and became their friends, then people would think the same of me and I'd have some of that status and I could feel just a little bit better inside, right? Because it was always all about me and how I felt and how I didn't feel good. I really am the selfish, self-seeking person the big book talks about to the core. And so, somehow I did it. Like I made friends with these kids and like I felt cool, but for them it came easy, and for me I was still like, I had to work really hard to do that, and it was draining, right? And still, like, I was always the one where, if there was a birthday party and there was only a certain amount of kids that could go, I was the one who didn't get invited in that group, And it really made me feel like shit on the inside, but I couldn't let anybody know that, right? Like, people can't know how I feel on the inside. I got to put out this air, like, this shit doesn't bother me, because if people knew how I felt on the inside, they would see how weak I am, right? That was a big thing with me. I never wanted to show any of my weaknesses. So, I went like that. Like I was a pretty like chubby kid with glasses, and I remember this one time, like I was at this birthday party and we were all talking about these girls we liked, right? And like I said this, Jenny in 6th grade was like the one I liked, and we were sitting in the bus line at school waiting to go home the next day, and somebody told everybody, right? And they were all laughing at me. And that was like a lot of my experiences, right? Like I kind of got bullied, but I was kind of like in the cool crowd. It was like this weird gray area, I guess. But like I didn't like being treated like that, or like people feeling like they could, talk to me like that, or feeling so self-conscious, right? Like I was the butt of jokes, and I knew it, and I hated it. So as I got older, I guess a little bit about my family too. I'll talk about that. So I grew up in McWanago, if anyone knows the area. My family was relatively normal, I guess. I had a mom, dad, brother, and sister. When I was in like 4th grade, my mom got cancer. She's fine now. But after that, she started drinking a lot. My dad would drink a lot too, so that's kind of like the routine I saw is you go to work, you come home, and you get shit-faced, right? And like all this drinking led to a lot of problems and a lot of fights in my family. You know, my mom and my dad would get into it, my mom and my sister, my dad would kind of smack my brother and I around, and the thing is like, we just didn't talk about it the next day, right? That's how we dealt with all our problems. When the parents woke up and they were sober and we woke up, we just pretended it didn't happen because we needed to have that normal family for all outward appearances. And I mean, there was shit, you know, the cops got called, there was like some domestic stuff, whatnot, but I mean, that was the environment I grew up in. Like drinking was an everyday thing, not like a whole ton of drug use back then, but it was normal, right? And so as I got older, I had, like I said, I have an older sister and an older brother, and they would always have friends at the house when my parents would go out of town, and you know, they'd be drinking, smoking weed and whatnot, and I saw them and I thought, these people are cool, right? They're the cool kids, they're older. Like, you know, when you're 12 years old, somebody who's 16 looks like a full-blown adult, and you're just amazed by it, and they're like, all right, these guys are doing this, if I want to fit in, I should get on this road. So pretty early on, you know, I started with the smoking weed, drinking, and that gave me like that I mean, when I drank, all of a sudden, all that like self-consciousness, that fear, it was gone pretty quick, right? I remember the first time I got drunk, and I mean, I probably had like 4 or 5 shots of my parents' Skull vodka, and I felt free, right? And like, I was running around like acting an idiot, like I never felt like that before. It was really liberating. And that kind of became my identity, right? Like, I was gonna be the kid who did everything first, so I'd at least have something that I could claim as mine, right? Instead of being like the chubby weirdo, like who couldn't get girls or anything, like, right? I was gonna be the kid that just got fucked up all the time. And so I never really had too many consequences back then. I mean, my brother and sister paved the way, so I got drinking tickets, but my brother had like 9 of them. So my 5 weren't all that bad. And I started getting some of those warnings, though, about some of my behavior that Bill kind of talks about in his story, you know, not heeding these warnings. And, you know, I got suspended from school for going drunk. And I remember talking to the principal as he called me into his office, and he said, hey, you might have a problem with alcohol. And I was always really good at school. I had like a, you know, 4.0, whatever. That's kind of how I got some self-worth, too. And I was like, there's no way, like, I'm doing really well in school. Like, it was just, you know, drinking in my car at 1 in the morning last night because I was bored, you know, like, I don't have a problem. Like, this is what people do. And, you know, he said something to me that I kind of shook off back then, but he said, you know, people like that are CEOs of companies can be alcoholic or whatnot. And, you know, I just really didn't believe him. And so, I mean, on things went, you know, and it progressed. You know, I started doing other things like coke, ecstasy, you know, all those party drugs, whatnot. And it was getting around the time I was going to college, and I had some friends that were starting to get into the prescription painkillers. You know, it's pretty common, like, thread of, you know, a heroin addict, of how that story went. And so I told myself I wasn't going to do them, but I was bored one day, and actually, I think I did, if I remember, my friend offered me a bump once, and I thought it was like coke. I was like, sure, I'll do it. It ended up being Percocet, and I went to this party this one night, and I mean, that was just incredible, because the thing with drinking was, you know, I'd black out, I'd make an idiot out of myself, I couldn't stay in control. But with the Percocet, it was like the same great feeling of like being able to do whatever I want and talk to girls and like be cool and carry on conversation, but like I was in the driver's seat, you know. That was like the first time I think I actually felt in control in my whole life. And I mean, I remember asking for more right away, right? Like, that was what I wanted. I'm like, all right, I'm on this train now, right? I'll manage it. It's gonna be okay, but like, this is pretty good, you know, if I can just do this on the weekends and supplement some of my drinking with, you know, some of these pills. And I mean, that's pretty much the cycle went as it does. You know, eventually I started using more. I got into snorting heroin because it was cheaper, you know, and like I knew all the risks. I had a friend who like overdosed really recently before that, and that was the guy I got high with, you know. So, you know, sometimes people will ask me, well, like, mostly family or friends, like, hey, would you have done things differently? It's like I knew what I was getting into, and I wanted to get into it. And like, looking back now, I don't know if I could have done things different. And with where I'm at today now, anyways, I don't care. Like, it doesn't bother me that that's part of my experience. But yeah, so, I don't know. I mean, eventually I went to shooting dope, right? And like, things got real bad, like real quick, and it went on that way for a while, And I just thought that everything that I'd been working for my whole life, right? Like, I just graduated college. I had nothing to like kind of tie me down anymore, I had these kind of vague plans to like maybe go to law school, but I'm gonna give myself some time so I can do whatever I want for a little bit. And like the wheels just really came off the wagon then. And yeah, I mean, it was like a really rapid decline, right? Like, lost job, was just like hanging out with this guy. We were selling drugs together, doing some other shit that I thought I would never do, and it ended up with me getting arrested and like charged with conspiracy to deliver heroin. And I remember sitting in jail, and it was my first time in jail, and all of a sudden, like, I got this 20-grand bail, and I was like, what the, I thought it would be like a little delivery. I'd talk my parents into giving me $1,000 or somebody, and I'd be out and I'd get high again. That was the plan. And when I called my dad and I said, my bail's 20 grand, like, can you get like a second mortgage or something? They're like, well, have fun sitting in jail. I was like, all right. But I remember sitting there and I'm like, these people just don't understand, like, right? I'm really not that bad of a person, like myself compared to the people on the other side of the doors. I'm just misunderstood. They don't get it, right? It was just a mistake. It's all these excuses, right? I have all these excuses for why I'm here, and most of them don't involve myself, right? Because why would I be to blame for that? I was just a victim of circumstances, as I often like to pretend that I am. And anyway, so after 8 months sitting there, I got out, got high, because that's what I do. And then part of my bail was, because I was out on bail. Finally, I got a bail reduction, and so I still had to go to court for all that stuff. But a condition of my bail was I had to go into treatment. Went to a 30-day inpatient, and my plan was I'm gonna bullshit this because I'm really good at that. I'm good at telling people what they want to hear, and I'm gonna go get high before I have to deal with court because fuck it, right? Like, I'd already thrown everything away. I didn't really think there was any rebounding from, there was no way I could get my life back, right? There was no way. They somehow convinced me in a small group that I should go, into a sober living house, and get involved with the program. And that's really, I did that. So I came here to Milwaukee and I got involved in Heroin Anonymous down here. And when I came to HA, we were at the Jazz Gallery, if anyone is around from that long ago. The Jazz Gallery in River West. We had a Monday night spiritual injections meeting. I know it's at the Alano Club now. And I remember going there and seeing people that were like me and kind of like sticking out. But again, my plan wasn't to get sober at this time because a lot of the messages I heard weren't anything to do with, it's just stop shooting dope. And it's still a struggle today. I'd hear people say in meetings, right? Like 5 years sober and I still struggle every day. And I'm like, I can't make it 2 days. How am I going to make it anything like 5 years? That's not going to happen. But thankfully I had the guidance of, people in the program and people around me that really cared about how I did. And they told me to get a sponsor, and they recommended somebody, and I remember meeting up with him, and, he took me through page 18 of the big book, and, he's like, now think about, if I'm that guy there, it gives some things that, the conditions they found most effective, and I didn't think about it at all, because I was already like, I'm just doing this, whatever, So I'm like, yeah, I thought about it, let's start going through the steps, and we really started on, the first page of the big book, and it talks about, nearly 100 men and women who have recovered from alcoholism. And, we talked about the circle and the triangle of what is Alcoholics Anonymous, and really about getting that balance in my program if I want to be able to enjoy my sobriety, right? So I was starting to get this message a little bit here that being sober didn't mean just not shooting dope, right? It meant that I could be free and enjoy life and have kind of this freedom I was looking for in drugs. I could get that through this program and through a relationship with a higher power. Which kind of blew my mind. But anyways, we went through the doctor's opinion, and this is really kind of where I started to understand what it means for me to be a heroin addict, because I thought the big thing was that I was physically dependent to heroin, right? Like, if you take the heroin away, I go through withdrawal, I'm a heroin addict. And, what I love about the doctor's opinion is like, I mean, you know, they talk in there about like, we're not just maladjusted to life or outright mental defects, right? There's this phenomenon of craving, this physical allergy that happens to me when I put heroin in my body. And it explains a lot of things for which we otherwise can't account. And it really did for me. And it made sense in a way that nobody, counselors, you know, whatever, doctors, whatever, nobody explained it to me like this. And this actually resonated with me. And I think it's pretty cool. You know, I was scrolling through Facebook before, and there was like, you know, 14 people that died in Milwaukee County from overdoses in like the past few days. And I was looking at the comments, and people are like, oh, you know, this is just natural selection, blah, 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 the shit you see. And what was so cool about the doctor's opinion is like, that's what people used to think, right? Like, there's just something wrong with the way we think. We don't have self-control. And the doctor said, like, no, I think there's really something physical, right? When I put heroin in my body, I can't stop doing it, right? Like, I don't determine when that ends. And it really did explain for me a lot of things which I couldn't otherwise account. For example, like, you know, I know I don't get paid for a couple more days, and I got some dope, right? And if I made my Excel spreadsheet, I could figure out the exact times when I should shoot this amount of dope, right? So I won't go through the sickness, because that's what I really don't want to do, and I'll make it till I get paid, right? And then all of a sudden the dope's gone by the end of the night, and the next day I wake up, and I'm like, well, what the hell do I do now? You know, and then you're going to Walmarts and fucking stealing TVs out of the Walmarts and getting way less than you should for what the TV is worth, but you take it because you can't do anything else about it. But that was the thing, you know, and it looked like in my head it would be like, all right, I'm going to do this little bit. I got the sick off, but now I really kind of want to be high, so I'm going to shoot a little more. And then, like, before I go to bed, I want to get that nice high, try and get back to like it was when I first started, you know, and I'd be high for like 5 hours, laying in bed, not sleeping, but just feeling great. And then, you know, I'd look at what I have left and be like, well, this ain't worth saving for the morning. I'm going to just do it all, right? And that was me. And every time, like, I could not account for that every time that happened. And I'd always wake up being like, why the hell did I do that again? And so that really did explain what it was for me. Like, once I start doing it, I don't control how much I do or when I stop, right? Like, I had this experience. I was just gonna do pills for a little bit, right? Because I had somehow got together a little bit of sobriety time, and I was just gonna do pills. And all of a sudden it was 9 months, right? 9 months off to the races. And that definitely wasn't my plan. And so, you know, as I was going through the first step, you know, I was looking at it, all right, like, I can't shoot dope successfully, right? I'm never going to be that guy that can do a little bit of dope, do some pills, right, whatever. Like, probably should stop altogether if I want to, right? Like, if I don't want to deal with these consequences anymore. But then, you know, the other thing I think about that with the first step that really made me come to understand it is, right, this idea of this mental obsession they talk about in the big book, that essentially, like, I can't even stay stopped once I get stopped, right? Because I have this mind that's a little bit crazy, right? Insane in that regard. And it leads me to shoot dope again, even when I fully went through the withdrawals. And that was my plan. So my plan when I was getting high for a period is I was going to go study abroad in Italy for a semester, and I was doing a lot of dope before then, and I'm like, well, this is great, you know, big geographic change. I'll just get through the physical withdrawals. After that, life's going to go back to normal, right? It's going to be all good. I won't have done dope in a while. That shit didn't work at all. When I was over there, I couldn't stop thinking about getting high, and the longer I went without getting high, the worse it got. I mean, I was still drinking, but I thought it was just a matter of time, right? Like, if I got enough time, that's sobriety, right? But it was bad. There's like gears winding up in my head. Like, I'm going crazy. Like, I can drink, I can do whatever, but I can't get that release of getting high. So, I mean, one day I went out and bought like this big bag of poppy seeds because I read online, like, if you mix it with water, you know, you could get some morphine off of it. That didn't work. Looked up how to say heroin on Google Translate in Italian, like, walked around the streets, you know, like, la HER0IN. And then I got ripped off. I tried a couple other things, right? Like, I wasn't able to get high. But so I was coming home, and here's where, like, the mental twist comes in, right? Like, I kind of know what happens when I shoot dope, but I think to myself, well, the last time, like, when I was, like, having my going away party, I was trying to get dope that night, and I couldn't get anything, so I did some subs, so I wouldn't be sick. And then I finally got dope, like, later in the night, as usually happens when you're in that situation, and I didn't get that high, right? So I had this excuse now, right? Like, my last time wasn't that good. You know, if I'm really gonna, you know, hunker down and stop forever, I at least want to be able to enjoy my last time, because that makes perfect sense. but I'm gonna just do pills again, because that was the plan, right? Like, this is how I'm gonna manage it. I'll just do some pills. And that led me back to take that first one. And there was really nothing I can do about it, because that thinking in that moment makes so much sense to me, right? I don't even think about everything else that's gonna happen, right? Like, I'm incapable of playing the tape forward to think about the consequences. The same thing happened when I got out of jail and when I was sitting in jail. And this just goes to show the point. Like, I had 8 months completely sober, right? I remember one day though, I woke up and some guy snuck some methadone in there, and like everyone was high, like even the people that are just there for DUIs. And like, I had gotten some bad news from my lawyer like 2 days before, so I just like kind of stayed in the bunk for 2 days. So I got up and everyone's high, and I was so fucking mad, because like, that's what I wanted. Like, that's what I needed to be okay. I was going crazy in there just being myself. And so I got out and I got high again, and thankfully I had to go to treatment. But I'm telling you, like, man, that 8 months of like just being dry and not doing anything else, that's why I didn't think I could make it 5 years, because if I wasn't in jail, I would not have made it, wouldn't have even made it close to that. So, you know, I went through, I did the rest of the steps with my sponsor. I had like a real big issue with the 12-step programs at first, especially with like this idea of God. Like, I remember walking around campus, my conception of God was like, you know, these people would hold up signs that say like, drinkers, smokers, masturbators, you're going to hell. And I'm like, well, shit. And that was my idea of what religious people were like, or what people that believed in God were like. And I found out, you know, it says pretty early on in the big book, right? I can have this God of my own understanding, higher power, whatever I want to call it. And all I need to go forward with that is just a little bit of willingness, you know? I don't have to believe anything fully. I just got to be willing to believe. And for me, that was the jumping off point. And at this point, too, you know, I came to understand, like, what led me to get high, you know? And like I said, my whole life, I just didn't want to be myself. When I was myself, they have the bedevilments in the big book. They talk about them. I'm restless, irritable, and discontented, right? Like, I'm afraid. I can't make any success out of life or find any purpose in life, right? And all of a sudden I shoot dope and I feel great, you know? Like, I can go to the family functions. I can be that guy. I can be there for my family. When I'm high, you know, when I'm dope sick, it's the exact opposite. But when I'm high, I'm good, right? And I remember some days, like, when I was getting high, I'd be so stressed, like they were trying to repossess my car. My mom would call me, you know, bawling her eyes out, just wanting to know where I am, that I'm alive. All this other shit would be going on, and I'd just do a shot of dope, and it was fine. You know, I'd be sleeping on the floor. I didn't care, because I was high. I was good. But really, I was searching for that feeling of being okay, and it really didn't have much to do with the heroin. What I found is heroin did it pretty well for a while. And so one of the promises that I got early on from this program is that I can get this feeling I've been looking for my whole life of just being okay and being able to wake up and face the day and not be afraid and have some sense of purpose if I do these steps and grow this relationship with God. And that's what kind of made me want it, right? It's like I was shooting dope trying to get that. I was drinking before that trying to get that. Like, if somebody says I can get that through doing this, I guess it's worth a try. Because if not, I can go shoot dope again at least, I guess. So that's kind of when I came to this point where I did believe I had two alternatives. It was do this program or go on to the bitter end, right? Trying to get high and blot out the consciousness of my existence. And you know, because of the people around me and because of the fellowship of Heroin Anonymous, I decided to go through with the rest of the steps. And man, like that did happen. Like I got so much more than I ever thought that I could get from working this program, you know, from doing it. And it's really, I mean, it's really amazing to think about. And one of the greatest things and the biggest promise I can give people, because it doesn't necessarily irritate me, but like when I watch like some movies that depict like 12-step programs, right? And like people are sitting around there and they're all like depressed and like, hey, I got like a year today and like it really sucked, but like at least I'm sober, you know? That's not my experience, right? Like I love being a part of this today, and I just so happen to be sober. And I don't wake up every day struggling not to get high. I did for a while early on in sobriety, and that's okay. Like that's part of the process. But that went away, you know, and I think that that's part of the 10-step promise, right? Like I'm placed in this position of neutrality, safe and protected. I'm not fighting. I didn't even swear it off, right? Like I didn't make those promises like I did with cigarettes. Like today is the day I'm not going to smoke. I just went through with the steps, and I stopped shooting dope, and I stopped doing other drugs, and I stopped drinking. And I continued to do that, and those thoughts don't come up. Like I still struggle with a lot of other things today, and life's not always perfect, right? But I'm not gonna lie, like life is good. And so where I'm at today is, so it was funny, like I said, I never had purpose. I always wanted success in life. I really couldn't picture doing the 9-to-5 grind, right? Coming home, my mom would put on the cooking channels. My dad would watch, the news and fall asleep on the couch. That wasn't me, but I mean, today I go to work. I work with a bunch of my friends who actually, we all worked at a company together and I got fired from. Well, I quit because I was going to get fired because I was getting high. And they bought out half the company. I work for them, right? Like I do the 9-to-5. I go home. We got 2 rescue dogs now. I got a wonderful girlfriend, her son, who's 6 years old. Watch Netflix and life is great. Like I get so much fulfillment out of these relationships that I'm able to have today because I'm willing to put my faith in a higher power and not call the shots in my own life. When I call the shots in my life, I fucking burn my life to the ground 100% of the time, it seems like, right? Like it'll go good for like a little bit and then it just all comes crashing down. And I mean, just in particular, like Heroin Anonymous it's really become a home for me. Like I love it. I've done other 12-step stuff and just, this is really where I feel most at home. Heroin Anonymous is a great place to be. There's tons of opportunities for me to be of service, and that's really, for the long haul, like doing a lot of that service work, it's part of the triangle, and it's been really important to get me to 5 years. Like that has carried me through some of the tough points, right? Like sponsoring guys, being involved in, there's a ton of stuff. I was fortunate enough that people trusted me enough nowadays to elect me as a world delegate for Heroin Anonymous. So I just recently got to go out to Phoenix, do some business stuff. Rewriting the pamphlets for Heroin Anonymous. We're arguing over all that stuff all the time. No one can agree on anything. I mean, I think we argued for about 2 hours whether something should be a comma or a period, right? But I wouldn't trade that for the world. I really wouldn't. Like that sense, like I said, that sense of purpose and fulfillment I get being on the firing line and being part of this, it's incredible. And I mean, I saw that it's really great to see a lot of people and hear that, are newer. And I mean, if I could give some advice, that would really be it. Like, get a sponsor, work the steps, like they say with the desperation of a drowning man, because that's really what it came down to at this point. I was either going to die or I was going to be the guy who went to prison over and over again. The 30-year-olds in prison that have been sitting combined 11 years, 11 years over time. And that was going to be me or I was going to be dead. So I really went for this with the desperation of a drowning man. And I mean, there's so many opportunities to, like I said, be of service, be helpful, really throw yourself into it, because that's what I found, has really been helpful for me. So, I mean, I love Heroin Anonymous. I love being part of it today. I really appreciate that Jeremy, gave me the opportunity to speak tonight. And with that, I'll pass.